Anti-Christian bigotry in Canada has become so obvious that Vice President-elect J.D. Vance recently called it out on X. Now, why was J.D. Vance commenting on church burnings going on in Canada? Well, it started with a video posted on December 3 by Jamil Jivani, who is the Member of Parliament for Durham. And he released a video announcing the launch of his new petition at Protect Christians in Canada. And he posted it to X with the caption, "I'm sounding the alarm. We must protect Christians in Canada from governments and corporations abusing their power in our country and from anti-Christian bigotry. I'll present this petition in Ottawa in the new year." So here's that video to give you a sense of what Jamil Jivani had to say.
Jamil Jivani here, Member of Parliament for Durham. I'm sounding the alarm. We need to do more to protect Christians in Canada. Now, when you see a Christmas tree like this in Parliament, you might think that's a sign of respect for Christians. But what good is a Christmas tree here in Parliament when you have a federal government that will not lift a finger to protect Christians from governments and corporations abusing their power? What good is a Christmas tree here in Parliament when you have a federal government that will not fight anti-Christian bigotry in Canadian institutions? We've got to take action now. We need to defend parental rights of mothers and fathers. We need to defend conscience rights of unionized and non-unionized workers, including healthcare professionals. We have to stop the crime spree targeting churches, including arsons and vandalism, and we need to defend the legal status of Christian charities and the freedom of expression of Christian churches. The time for action is now. Make your voice heard. Take a stand. We're launching a petition today at protectchristianscanada.com. I'm asking you to go on that website, and if you agree with me that we've got to do more to protect Christians in our country, please sign and share that petition. Take a stand. Make your voice heard. We're going to be presenting that petition at an event here in Ottawa in February of next year. And between now and then, we need as many people as possible to show support for the Christian communities in our country. This is not about forcing other people to live according to Christian values, no. This is about whether Christians in Canada have the freedom to live according to their own traditions and to practice their own faith without corporations and governments engaging in overreach. The time is now, ladies and gentlemen. That is why I'm sounding the alarm. Visit protectchristianscanada.com. Thank you. God bless you.
So those of you who listen to the Bridgehead briefing or our videos regularly will recognize that what Jivani is saying there is not an exaggeration. We've been covering stories consistently on what often seem like very small examples of discrimination against Christians, but taken cumulatively really show that Canada is becoming an increasingly anti-Christian place. And so I recommend Jivani's petition to all of you, just to give you an idea of what he's calling on the government to do specifically. The website says, defend the rights of parents to play a leading role in their children's education and important decisions involving their children, safeguard conscience rights and the freedom of religion for unionized and non-unionized workers, strengthen penalties and increase law enforcement in response to crime targeting churches and places of worship, and then, as he said at the end of that video there, protect the legal status and freedom of expression of Christian charities. Now, that last one would be a reference to Justin Trudeau's attack on crisis pregnancy centers, which we covered in a previous episode. The conscience rights and freedom of religion that he's referring to refers to the fact that there's a debate in Canada about whether or not healthcare workers should be obligated, compelled to refer for things that they believe to be wrong, such as euthanasia, abortion, or contraception. And so conscience rights are obviously incredibly important there. And so I think that this petition calls for much needed action. And there's a lot of people saying, well, these attacks aren't actually happening. This is just Christians getting a persecution complex. So I'd like to show you one video just giving you an idea of where the LGBT movement is at. Because people might say parental rights aren't under attack at all in Canada. Again, I think those of you who follow this show or maybe our commentary at thebridgehead.ca will know that, of course, parental rights are under attack. But let's take a look at what federally funded trans activist Fae Johnstone, who's the executive director of Queer Momentum, says. I'll just show you the video clip to give you an idea of where LGBT activists in this country are at with regard to the idea of parental rights.
I think we are seeing, it ties into the previous question. We're in an era of polarization where I think Canadians are having a harder time paying their bills, making ends meet, and supporting their families. And when you have that environment where life is harder, it becomes easier to channel that anger and to take advantage of that anger to gain power. I think in Canada right now, we're seeing this language around, so-called parental rights, this reference to gender ideology. And so we're using these as a distraction instead of delivering on healthy schools and happy.
So there you have it. Apparently, all of those parents who have come out to protests, who have lobbied their politicians about parental rights, about kids being transitioned against the will of their parents or without the knowledge of their parents, apparently those people are just, using their kids as a distraction to make a power grab. And parental, most notably there, Johnstone says, so-called parental rights. In other words, they don't even recognize parental rights as a valid concept. They just basically portray it as a cheap excuse for bigotry or vote grabbing. Now, it was really revealing to see the immediate response from Canadian progressives to Jivani's petition, because immediately they mocked the idea that any action is needed at all. So MP Nate Erskine-Smith snarked, "Those liberals and their woke identity politics, wait a minute." Erskine-Smith, incidentally, I noted, has been very vociferous about the need to combat Islamophobia, but has been uncharacteristically silent about the fact that more than 100 churches have been attacked or burned down entirely over the past several years. Now, the fact that progressive politicians have been largely quiet while churches get set ablaze, I think is evidence of precisely the problem Jivani is referring to. And Max Fawcett, a columnist for the National Observer, also chimed in. He said, "So much of contemporary conservatism revolves around cultivating and validating a sense of victimhood in groups that aren't actually victims." Now, he said this on X, and then he mocked the idea that Christians are victims. And so I asked him on X just one question. If over 100 mosques had been burned down or attacked, would you refer to Muslims as victims in that instance? And I would. If there was over 100 mosques in Canada that have been burned down or otherwise attacked, I think it would be fair to say the Muslim community was being victimized. Just like if over 100 churches have been burned down or attacked, I think it's reasonable to say the people who use those places of worship have been victimized in that sense. And of course, he didn't answer at all. Now, this is where Vice President-elect J.D. Vance weighed in. Now, for those of you wondering, well, why would he take notice of this? One, Vance is a pretty online guy in a lot of ways and keeps track of this kind of stuff. But he's also a good friend of Jamil Jivani. They met at Yale, I believe. And he quote-tweeted Fawcett to set the record straight. And here's what the Vice President-elect said, quote, "Canada has seen a number of church burnings in recent years thanks to anti-Christian bigotry. All over the world, Christians are the most persecuted religious group. Jamil is speaking the truth. Shame on journalists who refuse to see what's obvious." Now, Fawcett, who is allegedly a journalist, apparently did not notice what the incoming American vice president did notice, that Canada's culture is becoming increasingly hostile to Christians. Now, if arson attacks on churches aren't enough for him, perhaps Fawcett could consider the fact that in 2021, there were more police-reported hate crimes against Christians than Muslims. Here's a graph that illustrates that fact. If you take a look at it, you can see there were more police-reported hate crimes against Christians. I'll bet you didn't read a single article in any of Canada's major newspapers that said hate crimes against Christians on the rise. Why? Because Christians are not convenient victims. And as I said in an earlier podcast, progressives don't see Canadian Christians so much as part of our multicultural patchwork. They see Christianity not as Canada's founding value system, but as Canada's original sin. Here, by the way, is another graph that illustrates that same trend. I think it pretty clearly highlights the fact that hate crimes against Christians are on the rise. So again, I just think the double standard here really highlights what's going on. If over 100 mosques were attacked, or 100 temples, or 100 gurdwaras, maybe not 100 synagogues based on how things have been going over the last 6 months, but I think, Erskine-Smith and Fawcett and Trudeau and the rest of Canada's progressive establishment, they'd be howling bloody murder about this nonstop, and rightly so. But Trudeau would be immediately hosting solemn press conferences in which he would be announcing that this is not who we are as Canadians and expressing his zero tolerance for hate while wearing what he imagines to be his most prime ministerial face. But when there's a rise in hate crimes against Christians, zero mentions. Nothing. This is not news worth covering if you're a progressive politician running this country. And that's not surprising, but much of the agenda that Jivani is describing has actually been spearheaded by the Prime Minister and his ideological fellow travelers, and that's why I think Jivani's call to action is necessary and timely. Canada is going to be facing some very interesting negotiations with the incoming Trump administration in the years to follow, and it's interesting to note that Vice President-elect J.D. Vance is concerned about anti-Christian bigotry and church burnings in Canada. I wonder if that discussion will play any part in the relationship between our two countries going forward. Thanks, everybody, for listening to The Bridgehead. If you want to check out this podcast on other platforms, you can get us wherever you get your content. If you'd like to contribute to the discussion, please do feel free to drop a comment. If I've missed anything or there's another story that you want me to cover, please do make that comment as well. If you have any strong disagreement, weigh in that way. Or if you enjoyed the content and found it helpful, please do like, share, or subscribe. Thanks so much.